Well, excellent. It's great to be here on May 8th, Monday, May 8th here, and we have the always energetic Mike Hutjens from the University of Illinois here to present on farm feed diagnostics. I'm Corey Geiger, managing editor, standing in for Steve Larson here. And Mike, I don't know if you knew, but last week my wife and I and our family were on Family Feud with Steve Harvey, so just jumping over to a different platform here.
Wow. When is it going to be on? Do you know the date?
No, it aired on last Thursday. It went on all the CW and Fox networks, and there's going to be some clips out on thefamilyfeud.com. So just to remind our audience, download a PDF of PowerPoints to take notes during Mike's presentation. And at the end of the week, we'll have a 7-question survey that we'll also email out. We're really happy that Ajimoto is presenting this webinar. And Mike, with that, let's get rolling.
Yeah, very good, Corey. Good to have you online as well. And I think we have a really fun webinar for you here today. So let's get going. And you can see the title is On-Farm Feeding Diagnostics. And so we're all going to be off and running. And so I'd like to kick it off by simply saying, can we always find the sweet spot on the dairy farm? It simply means that, feeding cows is part science and part an art. I'm not sure that's a good rendition, Jim, of me over here painting, but it looks like the painting is better than me on my smock. But anyway, the question is not one answer fits all farms. But I think trying to decide when cows are really milking, doing really well, maybe there are some things that you and I can bookmark to say, boy, back when they're giving, and we have a herd right now, a very large herd in Illinois, averaging 98 pounds of milk. Well, the question is, what are we doing right? And then also sometimes if the cows aren't milking like they should, are there some areas to look at that we can maybe fine tune or review or find a bottleneck? So we want to de-bottleneck. And so when everything is working well, you can see Jim's visual here that the milk is really flowing. Everything's working well. But on some farms, we're going to find problems. That could be a nutritional problem. That could be an environmental problem. And that's a big one, too, with heat stress coming right now, hopefully in the next couple of weeks as far as that goes. And you can see there that the line gets kinked. And so the question is, can we open up that line and recover that lost dollars? And in many cases, Corey, with today's environment, that's going to affect profitability. So here we go with tools. And so we're going to go through a series of tools with you here today. And here they are. And so some of you are going to smile. If you count up, there are 10 of those dudes there. And we got 40 minutes. That means we got about 4 minutes. So Jim is going to be watching the clock pretty aggressively for you as far as that goes. And we always welcome, of course, your questions and comments as well. So we're going to look, the first one I want to use to talk about is feed efficiency. Very controversial. And so here's our first polling question. And so we're going to open up the polls, and Jim has got them open now. So here are your choices. The poll is, do you use feed efficiency with your clients or on your farm, or when you do nutrition, balancing, and working on rations? You have 4 choices, only one answer here. The first one is to evaluate the relationship between milk yield and dry matter intake. The second choice could be monitoring changes that you made with new forages or a change in rations. Number 3, kind of look on the farm. You have several groups on your farm. I want to compare the high group versus the heifer group versus the low group, or combinations thereof. Or number 4 says, nah, I don't use it. I don't use feed efficiency. And so right now, Corey, we've got about 60% of the vote in, and we already spent about 47 seconds of our valuable time. Do you guys use it out at your farm, Corey? Do you know?
Yes, we do.
Very good. And of course, you got Jerseys and Guernseys. Do you try to compare the two breeds?
We do, and there's definitely some differences between them. Obviously, part of it is each has a little bit different body size, and the component levels are a little bit different as well.
Well, Jim, let's go ahead and share that if you can. I assume you're seeing that. The popular answer is mine. 55% of you indicate looking at the relationship between milk yield and dry matter intake. And Corey, that picks up some of your body weight and body size differences as well. I think it's really powerful because sometimes people ask, well, the cows aren't milking well. Are they not eating enough feed, or are they eating too much feed? The second one also is useful as you get to new forage crops to see how does that change occur. We start making forages percentages here in May here in the Midwest. Values between groups, I think there are some values there as well. And 18% of you said we don't calculate that. So I'm going to challenge you here. And so, Jim, let's go ahead and wipe that off. And I'm going to move forward to the next PowerPoint. So here we go, some very basics that we developed here. Very little research in the field. Many research studies now calculate these numbers and use that in the experimental design. So you can see the calculation there. You divide the pounds of 3.5. Remember, it's 3.5 fat-corrected milk, at least in the U.S. And there's the formula on the bottom by the pounds of dry matter consumed, which means you remove the weightbacks from there. So you can see there's a very simple example, 75 pounds of 3.5 fat milk with 50 pounds of dry matter. That would be a 1.5 type number. You can make that into kilograms. If it's kilograms of milk or liters of milk by kilograms of dry matter, bingo, you've got the number as well. We like the high group to be over 1.7. In fact, if that goes over 1.9, then I would challenge you that biologically means she has to lose body weight. In other words, remember, the maintenance cost sits in this calculation. So therefore, 1.9 means you're really burning the candle. The first lactation group here, if you happen to have that, we think the spread should be about 1/10 of a point. If it gets more than 2/10 of a point, I would challenge you that you did not raise the heifers correctly. And therefore, once they get some groceries, they will do some growing. The low group, you can see slacks off. That's because they eat more than what they're producing, so it's a 1.3, and in most cases they'll add body condition score at this point. Here in Illinois, the average herd size about 149, 150 cows, 155 cows. You can see they're all mixed together. A 1.5 would be a nice target to look at. In Mexico, I was there a couple times. Being over 1.4 appears to be a really good target in Mexico. Fresh cow group 1.5, and then if you're below 1.3, you better try to do some detective work to ask what's going on. Now, one of the arguments is that there's no money on the table, and I think I would argue and that is incorrect. You can see my little arrow, I think, popping up here, and Jim, they can see that. You can see that if I go from 1.3 to a 1.4, now remember, we are getting 70 pounds of milk. That stays constant, and this is a typical feed cost here in the Midwest, 10 cents per pound of dry matter. So if I get that same 70 pounds of milk, notice from 54 instead of 50 pounds of dry matter, bingo, 40 cents. There's a 40-cent saving. Now, most of you on the webinar here today, you're going to be over here, somewhere between a 1.4 and 1.5. And so the question again, now I got 30 cents laying on the table. So remember that. When margins get tight, and boy, Corey, I think right now here in the Midwest and in the U.S. and even around the world, there's just tight margins in terms of the dairy business. There is money laying out there on the table. Okay, so let's leave feed efficiency and then move on to milk components. Another useful tool that we can follow because the cows are actually talking to us as well. Every year in the I believe it's the August issue, Hoards Dairyman relates. They attend the meetings and they will report what's happening nationally. So here you can see this is
we're getting that data from all the breed association annual meetings in their annual report. It's really good sound data.
Yeah, it's really good data. It's DHIR data, powerful information. And so you can see that Holstein herd, if you look at that Hoards article back in August, the fat test of 3.66 and a 3.0. Now, those of us in the United States, we know that's true protein. I know we got some German people online here. We got some other people from Canada also. Remember, a lot of you folks are using crude protein. So you would add a 0.2 to this number here, so to level a playing field. So we do not pay for milk urea nitrogen. That's about the big difference. This is basically the casein and the whey proteins. That ratio, if I divide the fat into the protein, that's 82%. So there's a benchmark. So is your ratio 82%, and are you achieving or exceeding the breed average out there? And we've listed the other breeds for your review as well. Now, if that protein to fat ratio is over 0.9, then the question is, are you missing out on milk fat? And these would be at least a short list of 3 things you and I could look at that may be indicating why we are missing out on milk fat. And this is a real challenge in Mexico. And I think it has to do with feed intake and forage quality there in Mexico. They have low butterfat tests, a lot of 3.3s, 3.4s, and it's all Canadian, U.S. genetics and Mexican genetics down there as well. Now, if that number is less than 0.75, now we're missing milk protein. And now you start start looking at amino acid imbalances or shortages, rumen microbial protein amino acids, and then RUP or the wrong RUP out there. So again, we always go back, is there dollars on the table? So let's look at this situation. I've got a Holstein herd giving 70 pounds of milk with a 3.5 butterfat test and a 2.9 true protein test. Now, if you go to Hoard's Dairyman, they said this is what the number should be. So you as the dairy manager, nutritionist, veterinarian, if you can figure this out where we're slipping on components, you come down here. I use the March 2017 value of milk fat, $2.43 a pound. So there's 34 cents laying on the table. If we can find that. Protein wise, you can see $1.82 a pound. I just saw the April numbers came out this fall. I just saw them this weekend, down slightly. But again, 13 cents laying on the table. I will argue with you that milk protein is going to become more valuable. I can remember here, Jim, about a year and a half ago, milk protein was almost twice the value of milk fat. And so there's 47 cents laying on the table. And that's the kind of the magic, I think, or the challenge of my webinar today is, can we find some of those monies that might be recouped on your dairy farm? So let's take a quick look at rumen-protected amino acids here. Dr. Jimmy Clark, some of you will recognize that name from the University of Illinois, now retired. He said if you feed a rumen-protected amino acids, one of three things might be seen on the farm. Certainly with amino acids, the milk protein increase, and we see commonly a 1/10 to 2/10 of a point increase in those herds that need that essential or critical rate-limiting amino acids. Response is modestly fast, and usually it's lysine, methionine. Now we're starting to look at histidine just a little bit as well. Or you might see a nice increase or change in milk yield, or you might see a change in milk fat. Generally, the milk fat increase is usually related to rumen-protected methionine. That's usually the amino acid more so in that situation there. So the question is, if you're going to put the amino acid in, kind of what, when, and how fast, what might I see out there on my dairy farm? I thought I'd show you just one study from The Ohio State University, done by Dr. Norman St. Pierre when he was still there before he retired. And this is one study, a very typical type study. You can see right around 16.5% crude protein. And the difference there on LP, that means they had an animal protein blend in that ration. And then they went through a software program and looked at the amino acid balance and added the required lysine methionine. And wow, isn't this amazing data? They have a couple other studies somewhat parallel. This is probably the one that's more realistic today. But you can see roughly a nice 8-pound milk increase here. That's about 3 liters for those of you, for our foreign people there. Milk protein came up a 1/10 of a point, and MUNs went down, which means we made better, efficient use of the nitrogen in the feeding program. And the income over feed cost using those prices for the protein and for the amino acids and for the milk, you can see, wow, a nice $1 plus laying on the table. So, I mean, this is the kind of things farmers can see when adding amino acids. So I thought I'd do a little survey for you. I did some checking around a little bit, right around 2 cents per gram for rumen-protected methionine. Really check with these companies on the availability, both in the rumen, bypass, and intestinal digestibility. They have those numbers. And of course, you want to have good protection in the rumen and good intestinal digestibility. Two major companies, this was data from a year ago, said two major companies had about 74% of the market share. And just talking with one of those companies here recently, very recently, like in the last 3 days, about 30% of the cows he estimated in the U.S. are being supplemented with rumen-protected methionine, and most of them are in the Midwest. We then did a similar type of discussion with lysine. Again, that price has come down. Historically, it was higher than that. We're looking at about 2 cents per gram of rumen-protected lysine there. Again, check the availabilities and rumen protections there. And from one good source, she estimated about 20% of the cows in the U.S. are being supplemented with rumen-protected lysine. And again, in the Midwest. Corey, you and I might ask, boy, why in the Midwest? I think this reflects a little bit of the feed company and nutritionist philosophies that we have here, and certainly the zeal here in the Midwest to going for higher milk production and milk protein because of the cheese yield that we're looking at as well. So
I was going to say that, Mike, exactly. I mean, when you have a cheese market, protein and components are paramount to making good product.
Exactly right. So what's the bottom line here? This is my guidelines to webinar, and you may want to copy these or you may want to just ignore them. I think you got to be running a rumen model. And we're talking such things as the AMPS program, such as CPM, Spartan programs, Brill programs. We need to find out really where they are. And I got the word sweet spot there, Corey. And the reason for the sweet spot, and that is because these programs all have different equations. So you're going to get slightly different numbers. And Spartan actually shows you a couple different values there. What I read in the literature now is about a 2.8 to 1 lysine to methionine ratio. Historically, that's been 3 to 1, and it seems that we're tightening down that a little bit more, which means that we're going to bring the lysine in a little bit quicker as far as that point. Number 2 is my cut point. It simply says, at what point am I really going to worry about amino acids? And I'm going to look at those herds that are producing in excess of 2.4 pounds of true protein. To make it simple, an 80-pound herd average with a 3 true protein test, there's your 2.4. You can get that with about 65 pounds with the Jersey cows as well. And then the other thing is, if your milk protein looks low for the breed average that was published by Hoards Dairyman, or it's occurring in your region, that might be another reason why you want to be looking at reviewing that area. Let's move on quickly now. Time keeps moving on us here. Let's take a look at another term, and this is kind of a new kid on the block as well, and that is using Forage NDF and UNDF values out there on your farm. This is a fun slide. You want to come back and look at this one. We could spend 5 minutes on that, but we aren't going to do that. This simply comes from Dairyland Labs, as you can see, and this is one of their results from a farm, and you can see we have 9 different values. And so one of the questions is, gee, Corey, which one or ones should I be using? And we're going to be using UNDF 30. And we're going to be using, NDF 30. I think I missaid that. NDF 30. That means 30 hours of fermentation in situ or in vitro. And then I'm going to be using UNDF 240. That's the two I'm going to use. I'm not saying that's right or wrong. Here you can see that from Dairyland, this would be the average value that we're looking for on corn sides, around 54. And you can see the UNDF around 10.5. But gee, look at the ranges we have over here, folks. So a very interesting slide that you can come back and look at your leisure or print off. As Corey points out, you can print that off and get the job done. So why are we looking at NDFD? And this is the classic work from Michigan State by Mike Allen's group over there. Dramatic impacts. So every 1% increase in NDF digestibility, you can expect to see in the forage program an increase in dry matter intake and in 4% fat-corrected milk. That is the feed efficiency corrected back to 3.5, about 1.8. So that's a pretty useful number as well. The Minnesota group here, Hans Young's group, here's the value for corn sides. So to me, the NDFD is going to give me an index of the quality and digestibility of the corn sides on the farm. And so if I go from one crop to another, from one year to another, it gives me a pretty good idea. And you can go back and look at these numbers right here. We just got this data 2 weeks ago from Dairyland Labs. Again, our thanks to Dairyland Labs. 140,000 samples in the 2016 crop year, and you can see where you want to be. Here is the brown midrib corn silage over here. You can see, again, if you got BMR corn silage, you want to be somewhere in the mid-60s. Here's your all corn silages sitting right around 55. Here sits alfalfa at about 45. And I think, Corey, this is going to get exciting because we now have low lignin alfalfa coming in, and I think we're going to start seeing that moving up a little bit. You can also see your small grains and your grass silages there as well. And the good news is there are winners over here and there are big time losers over there. So the question is, where does your NDFD fit on your dairy farm?
Then look, Mike, if you want to flip to that slide, if it's possible, real quick, if you see that shift from traditional corn silage to BMR, what would you maybe suspect might happen with alfalfa? As we see the low lignin, how might that chart change a little bit? Yeah,
I think we're going to see it shift over to the right side. And I'm not going to speculate the units. If Thomas or Dan Understander would be safer on that. The reason I'm cautious on that is because there's two ways to use low lignin alfalfa. You can either cut it early enough, which means it's going to shift this direction, or if it rains the wrong time and you wait 7 days, it'll still be here. So I'm guessing it's probably going to move to the right once we start seeing that low lignin. And I think hopefully we'll have a webinar on the whole effects of low lignin forages on dairy cattle. So that'd be my speculation, but remember, this is the Hutjens guess. Be careful. Just be careful. So what are you going to do with that UNDF and ration programming here? Well, first of all, two things. If it gets too high, then I'm going to have a fill factor. So it seems the cow just can't eat enough. And those of you with crossbreds and jerseys, eyes wide open on that. I also need a minimal amount to make sure that rumen is working well. And that's why we see a lot of farmers in the U.S. adding a half a kilo or a pound of straw to the diet because it makes the cow healthier out there as well. In a recent Hoards Dairyman article, we saw this guideline, and one of the first ones I really saw, which I really like, 0.35 to 0.4% of the cow's body weight as UNDF. So you can calculate that value based on the dry matter intake of the forage and the forage test results. So my guideline is 5 pounds for Holsteins of UNDF 240, because that makes 240 hours analyses, and for jerseys, about 4 pounds of UNDF 240 for jerseys. So that's something we can calculate and say, okay, boy, the cows are really eating. Where's that number at? Eventually, I think, Corey, we're going to get to the total ration, but we don't have a lot of good feel. What do we do with fuzzy cottonseed? I think it's going to have a very high value. What about soy hulls? I think it's going to have a low value. What about citrus pulp? What about almond hulls? A lot of unknowns. So right now, I'm just saying with forage UNDF out in the program. And lo and behold, Corey, this is not a big surprise. Here's those same samples from Dairyland Labs, and now you can see the inverse. And so you can see really good corn silage. BMR is going to be somewhere around 7-8% UNDF. And of course, it's just the kind of a mirror image. Now, be careful. These are expressed as a percent of the dry matter, where NDFD is percent of NDF. So be careful. Those numbers vastly different as far as that goes. So again, a powerful tool, I think, that you and I should be calculating out there on dairy farms. Moving on. Corey, we're 3 minutes late here. Moving on, we're going to talk about corn particle size. Another powerful tool here. And in the old NRC 89, they actually had these values. And so you can see corn is not corn. And this is listed as mcals per pound of dry matter. So you can see that the same corn, depending if it's cracked or if it's steam flaked or finely ground, it has a different energy value for my dairy cows. Now, what I did is I stuck these numbers in here. So these are Hutjens guidelines because cracked corn is 2200 micron. How do I get that? We'll talk about that in just a second. Here you can see, and here's the finely ground corn. So you can see a tremendously improvement in energy availability. Now, could that cause acidosis? And the answer is sure it could. That could lead to acidosis. So for every, as we say in the business, that's a double-edged sword. Now you come over to high moisture shell corn, or high moisture, and these are all shell corn. It's got to be wet enough. So it's got to be over 28% moisture. If it's too dry, it's got to be treated as dry corn. Steam flaking. Trust me, steam flaking is an art. And this is the numbers we want here. If you got beef cattle in your area, they will steam flake even to a much less squeezed corn kernel. I want to use the word density. That isn't quite the right word to use. This would be my soft textured corn, high lysine, waxy corn would fit in that category. There's some other ones out there as well. A soft endosperm, what we call a flowery endosperm, and you want to be here. You want to be in this range here, one of these products here to get bang for your buck on the corn. Here's that classic study from Penn State that's done by Dr. Varga, published in the Journal of Dairy Science. Again, you may want to come back and study this one. This is a fascinating one. This is the slow, and you'll have to read her paper. They define that a little differently than I do. Slow versus moderate versus fast. So this would be a coarser corn. This would be a finer corn. And look at milk production. 6 pounds. A look at butterfat test, going down slightly, not statistically significant. Milk protein up a little bit. Bingo. Months, just what the Ohio State data said. Yep, it works better as well. Similar dry matter intakes, these are rates, and actually some of the new models, you can actually put these numbers in. You better be a smart person if you're going to start changing those numbers there. Rumen pH is going down slightly. Again, I do not believe that is statistically significant. The VFA pattern is changing. Less acetate, more propionate, and that's good news to make blood glucose and milk lactose. And now you can see a trend for some more VFAs. That's energy over there. Here's your parallels of milk urea nitrogen. And of course, if you're getting more energy from the rumen, less body weight loss or mobilization and NEFAs out there as well. Really a fun story to look at. Study this, come back and take a look at this PowerPoint at your leisure. How am I going to measure that? Well, basically, we use the 5-screen system. They are available through NASCO to buy the 3. These 2 are used primarily for high moisture corn, as you can see here. These are the ones you want to go for dry corn. Doesn't work for ear corn, doesn't work for barley, doesn't work for a grain mix. It's got to be honest to goodness shell corn. I smile here because we have a mill here in Southern Illinois that will sell you 700 micron corn or 1800 micron corn or in any mixture you want. So they'll customize your corn mix however you want. So you can see this is the guidelines for really wet corn. This is modestly high moisture corn. I'm saying if it's below 25, and that's a Hutjens number. If it's below 25% moisture, I'm going to call it dry corn, and these 2 will match up here. Here's a sample that came in about 3 years ago. It's got a little age on it, but the point is what? It simply says that this dairy farm should have ground that corn harder. We have too much corn coming out here on the big screens and not enough fines down here for dry corn. And that's what you're going to try to find out there on your dairy farm. Okay, moving on to our next one, forage particle size. New things here as well. So we try to give you some of the new information on forage particle size. And so this looks very familiar. There's the 3-box Penn State shakeout. This is a very good corn size, right? This is the top box. There's your middle box. There's your bottom box. That is a very good shakeout for corn silage. How do I know that? Because we weighed them. We weighed them. Now here's the new stuff. Got your ears on? Here we go. Now there's a new box. There's a new box now. This is the old system with a 4-box system. And that 3rd screen is 1.1 millimeters. The new box from Penn State is now 4.0 millimeter. So be sure you know, if you got a 4-box system, which screen you have. Now, these are our guidelines, and I'm not going to take time to walk you through them. They are a little bit heavier on the top screen than other universities will list, especially Penn State, but we think this is the magic screen. And we want these 2 to be over, obviously, 50% of the TMR out there in the program. This is starred. You can see this is 3/4 of an inch theoretical length of chop with a kernel processor, and you can see how this breaks out. If you have shredlage, and some of you have that out here, this number will be about 30%. This number will be 30%. So shredlage does give you a different physical characteristic in the corn silage. Now here's the new box. Now Jim and I went to the Penn State website, and this is their guideline. So you can see they really have a much lower number than we have listed over here. They give you a lot bigger ranges. So these are Penn State numbers with the 4-box system. This is Illinois guidelines with the 4-box system. And over here, you're going to see there sits the 3-box. And that's my favorite. And so in the 3-box, these 2 get added together. So I like the 3-box approach because in the field, it seems to be a little easier to measure, to quantify, and to work off of out there in the program. Okay, we're still on forages, remember. We had talked about the Penn State box. We talked about the fiber values. Here is the Rotashaker, and we've got some nice footage, but we can't share it with you there because a company owns it. But this thing rotates back and forth, and we're asking, where does the starch appear in these various screens that we have listed here? And this would be the number 4 screen if you're looking at numbers. So what we're looking at is how much is excellently processed. And now we're talking corn silage. We're not talking alfalfa. We're not talking grass silages. We're looking for excellent, adequate, and poor. Classic work from Dr. Randy Shaver at Wisconsin. You can see that when it's adequate, we got 0. When we have a poor job, we lose 2 pounds of milk. When we have an excellent job, we gain 2 pounds of milk. So if you did last year's corn silage here and this year's corn silage there, then your cows, if they understand the research, should give me 4 pounds more milk. So what are we doing here in the Midwest? So again, my thanks to Dairyland Labs. We went back. They shared their data from 2016, that over 1,000 samples down here that they had analyzed in their lab. And you can see 31% got into the excellent category. That's over 70. There's your magic number, over 70. So if you're going to do this, you want to be sure that's the number we're targeting. You can see roughly 55% were in the average range, which means we're leaving potentially 2 pounds of milk on the table from here to there. And then 14% of them must be wanting to feed turkeys or something, or pheasants, who knows what. But 14% are down here in this bad area, which means we're leaving maybe 4 pounds of milk in the manure of the cow out there in the program. I thought it'd be fun to go back, Corey, and take a look. This is historical, looking back over several years. And so the good news is you can see this now in this number, we're seeing about a third of our guys getting it right, and we're seeing fewer guys getting it wrong. One opportunity, though, we still have some really neat opportunities in terms of getting more milk out of our corn silage. And then let's wrap up with one more forage thing that I think is pretty cool technology, and that's the rumination collars and ear tags. And so now we can actually measure the cud chewing effects on dairy cows. And so I'm going to show you some European data that Jim prettied up for me very nicely. This shows days after calving. So you can see at day 4 or 5 after calving, my healthy cows, they're over 400. And we think, according to the Michigan State or Michigan nutritionists out there, that number needs to be over 450 to 500 for healthy cows. And so you can see cows with slight cases of ketosis or metritis. They just keep zipping on down. And of course, this cow is screaming at me that we've got a health issue out there on the farm. So again, more technology coming at us at this point. And for those of you that have that technology, there might be some useful numbers to take a look at as well. So that ends up that part of the presentation. Look at forages. We covered about what I think 4 rather important areas out there as well. This is not brand new technology. You can see a nice job here Jim found. That's one of those power rakes, and you see a nice job on face management here as that farmer rakes down the silage off the face of that. This data comes from Randy Shaver and Lehman Kong at the University of Delaware, and it simply answers the question, did we do a good job of fermenting the silage? So the previous PowerPoint said, did we harvest it correctly? Did we process it correctly? Now this question is, did we ferment it properly? And of course, this has got silage inoculant written all over it, the right dry matters written all over it, the right compaction. There's a whole webinar sitting on this slide here. But the question is, do you check your grass and legume silages, your corn silages, and your high moisture corn to answer the question, did I get it right out here in the program? And again, a very busy slide. I think we used this previously, Jim, in one of our webinars. But again, I thought it was worthwhile just sharing that to answer that question in terms of actually ensiling and getting these feeds right out there on the dairy farm. Powerful, powerful message. Now we're going to go to another area as we get into our second phase of our webinar, and that's looking at manure evaluation. So again, Jim, you've got it open, I believe. He's shaking his head yes. Now you can answer 1 of 5, and you do multiple. Little did I know until today, when you see a square, that means you got multiple choices. If you see a circle, you only have one choice. So on manure evaluations, are you manure scoring? 1 to 5. Are you manure washing using the Cargill screen or some other screening device or a colander? Are you running fecal starch analyses? Are you running fecal pHs? Or I don't mess with any of those as far as that goes. So we're off and running at this point.
Certainly, Mike, if you look at those feed samples from Dairyland Seeds, there's going to be a range of scores there just in the manure scoring alone. Based on what they're doing with their corn and corn silage.
Exactly right. So, Corey, I tell you must have graduated from the University of Wisconsin. You picked up right on that very quickly.
Captain Obvious here.
Well, we've got almost 2/3 of the votes. I don't think the Republicans are voting today for some reason. We're really slow. Jim's going to share it, though. We only have one choice. Is that right, Jim? We only have one choice. We misspoken here. So, interesting. You can see manure scoring about, you only had one choice. That was the most popular choice here. Manure washing, fecal starches. Nobody's using fecal pH. Bingo. Congratulations. You don't want to use the fecal pH. It really doesn't tell us much of anything. And 23% of you aren't using it at all. So, hey, get your ears on here. I'm going to challenge you, as Corey already has, simply saying there's some opportunities out there on dairy farms. So, quickly, let's look at manure scoring. No, your cow may look at it, but I'm not sure she's the one to do this manure scoring. What we're doing, we're going to score from 1 to 5. Actually, this system was developed at Michigan State University and published in a Dutch booklet that I saw, and I thought it was pretty cool. We're looking at scores 1 to 5. And here are your characteristics. You don't want a 1. You don't want many 2s, to tell you the truth. You really want a 3. You really want a 3 as far as that goes. And then number 4, this stuff's going to stick to your boot as far as that goes. And here comes a number 5. So a nice rating system, very easy. In fact, our students, we teach that down at the Southwest Consortium every year, and 10 minutes they've got it at this point. So let's look at these very quickly. Here's your score 1 manure. This cow has got a big problem. You can see it is still bubbling here, which means that it's still fermenting coming out. Is that because some of that corn cory that we saw a bit earlier in the manure? Is that due to salmonella or some other thing? Not enough fiber, too rapid of a change, the buggers sorting the feed. There's your score 1. Here's your score 2. Notice this again, a little more pattern or firmness to this manure dropping. You can see more splattering here. This is a classic number 2. Already, Corey, you and I can see, bingo, here we got some corn popping up here. Here's your number 3. We love this as a number 3, but notice it's got a little bit of a dimple here, so obviously this cow is not walking. She is standing still. You can actually hear a 3 hit the concrete. Got a very distinctive sound. Now, yes, there's corn in here, there's fiber in here, and that's going to get us to the manure wash here in just a minute, but this is what you like to see. Actually, you can take a ruler and measure about 1.5 inches in height, and that's pretty common. Here's your score 4 cow, very characteristic of a dry cow program or a feed that's low in protein. There can be other factors as well. And here comes your score 5, and no, it is not a horse. This is cow manure, and this is coming from one of the high straw diets here at the University of Illinois, one of those cows there. And again, you can see lots of fiber, but again, there is straw being fed to those cows as well. So now that you've seen them, the question is, what are you going to do with them? So these are our guidelines. On the high group, I would like to see really no number 1s, but you will see an occasional one. So I say less than 5%, less than 20% score number 2, and less than over 80% score 3. In a herd I walked several years ago, this number was 40%. 40% and 10%. And let me tell you, when you're walking cows and you got that many cows, that score, you better be on the move when a cow decides to cough or defecate. The low group, I should see really all 3s. I should see all 3s over here. I do not score dry cow groups. We can talk more about that in the question and answer period. Where's the research behind this? This is just field experience, walking lots of cows and lots of groups as far as that goes. This is where I'd like to be. If you're not going to collect the data, then how are you going to analyze it? So you have to decide kind of what you're looking for. Where is that quote-unquote sweet spot out there? What about fecal starches? We're still in the manure business here. Fecal starch means that we're going to take a sample of manure and we're going to send it to a commercial lab. Again, thanks to Dairyland, they say me in the last year, you can see they had about 140 samples sent to us here in this last year. You can see a third of them are over 5%, and that's kind of the benchmark from Penn State and the University of Wisconsin as far as having starch in the manure. The bad news is you will not see this. This is pretty usually just in the manure not being utilized correctly. Once you get over here, you'll start seeing that manure, that flex in the manure as far as that goes. So the Wisconsin guidelines are that when you're sitting in the dark green, you're cooking with gas. Over here, you're kind of in that marginal area. This could be coming from corn grain, corn silage, could be coming from byproduct feeds as well. So could be coming from various sources. You can't tell for sure. That's why you got to run the forage particle size and the grain screens, because it'll help lower that down. Why are you excited about that? Well, because we know that once that number gets below 5%, you're going to have over 90% recovery. You never get 100% because some of the starch is just physically tied up, physically or chemically with lignin or fiber sources there. But here's the take-home message. For every 1% decrease or increase in fecal starch, you got about 2/3 of a pound of milk. So I'm going to back up here if my keyboard works with me here, and it's going to come back here. It simply says that some of these people here, let's say you're with the 8 over here, you're leaving 4 to 5 pounds of milk in the manure because we are not capturing it and getting it available in the rumen or the small intestine, and in some cases the large intestine. Now, some of you are really nervous about bloody gut. you might find large amounts of fecal starch may be a precursor or cause for bloody gut. So there's no research tie there, but certainly can be a question as far as that goes. Okay, manure washing. Again, I'm looking at my survey. Again, we don't know officially how many we are really doing all these practices here. Manure washing simply means I'm going to take some manure and I'm going to put it in through a series of screens or ways of separating. Here you can see, here is, if I ran a fecal starch on this, I would bet you it's over 10% because you and I can see corn. Now, remember back when I was in college, and that wouldn't be at Wisconsin, of course, but anyway, they said, well, as long as the corn is cracked, the cow got all the value out of it. Wrong, wrong, wrong. You can also see a fuzzy cotton seed here, a fuzzy cotton seed over there as well, one sitting down here. So we're going to wash this manure, and we're going to take about 500 grams. That's about a plastic cup, a small plastic cup that you'd see in a motel or something like that, and I'm going to wash it on this screen right here. Now, this is the number 8 screen. Other researchers will use the number 16 screen. And Cargill uses 3 different screens when they wash their manure. So I use a number 8 screen, and I'm looking for this. This is corn, and this came from the corn silage. How do I know that? Because we had the screen on the grain as far as that goes. Then we'll come down, we'll also look for soybean and forages. Here's a fuzzy cotton seed. I squeeze it between my fingers. Quickly, we're running out of time here, Jim is reminding me. We're looking at milk urea nitrogen. Here's our guidelines. I'm looking for my milk urea nitrogen between 8 and 12 milligrams per deciliter. Your Europeans use milli equivalents, and that's about twice this number. But so this is where I want to be. If you go to Google, you'll find a lot of these numbers here. Our good dairymen are sitting over here, and we know that if it's too much milk urea nitrogen, we are wasting protein, and that is a Wisconsin number going from 15 to 10 or 10 to 15, difference of 2 pounds of soybean meal. Environmentally, that's going to be a factor as well. Locomotion scoring, and we're gonna these are some of the older topics, so we won't spend as much time on them. On locomotion scoring, this is the one again coming from Michigan State, going from 1 to 5, using the ZinPro, who's really championing this as far as that goes. And you'll see a lot of literature that they have this on, and you're really watching these cows when they're standing, when they're walking. We're not going to bother you with the pictures here today because we don't have the time. We're looking at frequency distribution of these cows, and this is a California study, and I think it's a pretty good one. And they simply say in their research study that if we have 75% of the cows scored 1, 15% scored 2, less than 10% scored 3, and let me tell you, that's a tough goal. There's some new research out of the University of Minnesota and Wisconsin that says this number sits in the teens. The Farm FARM program, we had them on as well a couple of months ago on the Hoards webinar. That becomes one of their numbers they're looking at. And these cows are physically not limping. These are limping cows. And of course, those are the ones that get us all kinds of trouble with PETA and organizations that want to make sure we are harming our cows. Look at over here, guys and gals. We drop milk and we affect dry matter intake. So this is big. Then we got body condition score, and I think, Jim, this is our last one, if my memory is right, of the 10. And then we're going to wrap up. There's some new stuff here, guys and gals. Get ready. Here is a body condition score. And this is Illinois with Dr. Drakeling, Dr. Cardozo. We've really dropped our numbers down. So this used to be a 3.5. Now we really dropped down. So you can see our dry cows, we are looking at dropping somewhere about a quarter of a body condition score. Here, they're going to drop down, and then we're going to get them back up here before they go dry in the lactation period because they're more efficient. What's some of the newer data? Now, this is from Penn State. Jim and I thought we would just share this data with you. Notice their goals are slightly different than ours. So not everybody agrees. They got a little more spread, a little more numbers for you to take a look at. And again, you can see their maximum will be higher than our maximum, and we'll just share that with you. Here's a neat study from Paul Fricke, in which I think makes a lot of us look at that. There's 2 big messages here. The first one is look at body condition at calving. And these are commercial herds in Wisconsin scored by the same group of people. And so you can see some of these cows came in thinner and some came in heavier. And that's an important thing in my mind to look at. They went back and scored those cows 21 days after calving. And then they broke them into 1 of 3 groups. These are the groups that lost body weight, those that maintained body weight, and and those that gained body weight. Then they went back and looked at preg rates at 32 days. 13%, 33%, 47%. And boy, there is your challenge and my challenge. How do you get enough dry matter, enough groceries in those girls in early lactation, because we know it's going to have an impact on body condition. It also is going to affect the fat pad in the foot or the hoof area, which gives cushion. So this really becomes a big one. So in summary, let's start wrapping up here, and we got a couple of questions that we can discuss, and we'll turn it back over to Corey. Here is the Hutjens guidelines. So this is my summary slide. And so the first thing we're going to check, I'm going to check my shell corn and say, am I in that 500 to 800 micron for my dry shell corn? High moisture corn, higher numbers. Number two, I'm going to look at the TMR, and I want my TMR in that 40, 45 range. That's a 3-box number. That's where I want it to be. Then I'm going to go out and I'm going to run my silage fermentation. And unless I'm using the Buchnerei inoculant, I'm going to be looking at 70% lactic acid and 30% acetic acid. If you use the Lactobacillus buchneri, the acetic acid level will go up slightly. Next, I'm going to do my feed efficiency, and I want to be around over 1.5 for the entire herd. I'm going to look at milk urea nitrogen, and I want my milk urea nitrogen probably around 9, 10, or 11 in that range there. On fecal scoring, I want to have 80% of my cows at a score 3. These are my lactating cows. On locomotion score, I want to be less than 10% at a score 3. My body condition score in the lactating pens, I don't want to see any cows below 2.75. I want to see no cows over 3.25. We usually score these cows as they come out of the parlor. You got to score them quickly. Kernel processing score, I am going to go in and I am going to go hopefully with over 70. The highest score I saw was an 86. I never saw that sample, but the lab said it was an 86. My corn silage NDFD, at the 30 hour, I want to be over 55. It's BMR, I want to be over 60. Next, I'm going to look at UNDF 240 forages for Holsteins. I want to be somewhere around 5 pounds, maybe slightly below that number there. And then finally, with my legume and grasses, using the NDF D30, right around over 50%. Now, it's a little lignin, maybe we can crawl that up a little bit, or using an RFQ value of over 70. So with that, Corey, our time is gone. We're right on the money here. We'll let you kind of give any comments there, and then we'll go back to the questions that we have here.
Well, thank you, Mike. Great presentation over a 45-minute window here. And I'd like to remind all our viewers here that you can download the PDF of the PowerPoint again if you want to take notes or review it. Mike had a lot of good detail, and that checklist was awesome at the end there. And also, I'd like to give a shout out to Jim Baltz on the University of Illinois team, and Patty Hurchin, who work a lot, put a lot of behind-the-scenes work on this webinar each and every time. They'll be sending out a 7-question survey at the end of the week so we can make these webinars better. And we'll also be archiving Mike's presentation, and it'll be available at hoards.com. Our next 2 presentations, Monday, June 12th, we're going to be monitoring and managing metabolic diseases in the transition cow, and Daryl Nydam from Cornell is going to be doing that, and Daryl writes for us regularly. And July 10th here, right after a week after July 4th, will be Keep Those Heifers Coming On, presented by Mike Overton in Elanco. And importantly today here, we'd like to again thank Ajimoto Heartland for making this presentation available with Mike and the Hoards Dairyman team, and their website there is at the bottom, www.agipro-l.com, to learn more from them. And with that, Mike, let's open it up for questions.
Yeah, we have some questions here that we can relate back to our readers, and make sure to go ahead and send those in. We have several, and we'll get those done and then wrap up our webinar here. I also want to recognize Hoards Dairyman's contribution, because without Hoards support and advertising, this would never be possible, and our sponsors are critical as far as that goes as well. Our first question is one that's very easy to answer as far as that goes. Is it really necessary to evaluate fecal starch? And my answer is yes. Now, if you're not feeding much corn silage and that, but you're all going to be feeding barley or wheat or some type of corn, I think it's necessary because I cannot see 5, 6, or 7%. If I see corn in the manure, well, then we screwed up. Now the question is, where did it come from? And that's going to be important. That's what your screening and your kernel processing score will help us out with there just a little bit. Now here comes the big political question, and I'm just telling you what I'm doing. And the question is, if we're using NDF 30, why don't we use UNDF 30? And the answer is the researchers are telling me that the UNDF 240 is the way to go. That is going to be the best value. I'm using NDF 30 because that says 30 hours in the digestive tract. If you want the academic answer, that should be NDFD at 48 hours because that is also the more stable number that we would have out there to work off of. So I'm just kind of falling in line with the 240. And there's only 4 or 5 of us that are sticking our necks out on numbers, actual numbers here, and everybody's using 240. So I have no idea where the 30 is, and I've got a feeling it's variable. Now, if you go back to that article or that PowerPoint that we had from Dairyland Labs, you can see how that changes, how those numbers change. So if that's your sweet spot, and that's the one you want to use, and have at it. I think the UNDF is kind of all new territory. In fact, some of you are going to be going to a Discover conference here in a couple of weeks up in Chicago on forage fiber values as far as that goes. So that's the reasoning for it. Both of them, I'll be honest with you, listeners, are controversial. So I'm comfortable with the NDFD at 30 hours because I think that's the normal residence time of feeds in the digestive tract. And I like that reason, even though researchers will go to 48 hours because there's less variation. And now you're saying, well, come on.
Mike,
yes.
If people are interested in going to that Discover conference, that is put on by the American Dairy Science Association, so adsa.org for more details on that.
Very good, Corey. I'm not sure there's any room left there. That they fill up pretty fast as far as that goes, but it's going to be in Chicago. The next question is, what is too low for a MUN? And that's that sweet spot. Again, I think if you get below 8 or 9, eyes wide open. What do you mean eyes wide open? I have to have enough rumen ammonia that's either being recycled or being fed through the ration to maintain optimal microbial yield of amino acids. And so, the real answer would be, well, if you could tap the rumen, we'd be all set. But okay, we aren't going to do that. So if you're going to be down around 8 or 9, then you're going to have to ask, are you getting adequate milk volume? Is the milk protein test where you want it to be for Holsteins or whatever breed you're at? And then look at the numbers. And what do you mean look at the numbers? Well, look at the metabolizable protein on your model. Look at RDP, RUP. Look at lysine, methionine grams being provided to the cow. So I think you just do some detective work. But I do know that once you get over 12, you're getting in the urine business. And when you get over 17 or 18, not only are you in the urine business, now you're really screwing up the environment, and you may also have some reproductive negative as far as that goes. So that's my view. That's my view in terms of a milk urea nitrogen. Now, we've got another question from Pakistan, and I'm going to have to read this because it just came in. We have a herd of 3,000 milking cows, and we focus more passage rates due to more corn particles remaining in the feces. Yep, that could be a fact. I don't disagree with that. So the rate of passage could be another factor besides the physical form and the source or the source of that starch. So we just focus rate of passage. We get less corn appearing in the feces. Good news. But I will challenge my Pakistani participant. I'd still run the fecal starches because you may not see it, and you're right. He's got it right, and that's why some people will add a little bit of straw, slow things down, and to get better utilization in the rumen. The problem I have with corn is that stuff is fairly dense. It's going to get flushed out pretty fast as far as that goes, and they're having good success with it. They're getting 30 liters of milk. That's a lot of milk in Pakistan for us U.S. guys. That's about 66 pounds, and that's under heat stress conditions as far as that goes. So a good comment. He's right. And I think he's wrong. Next, that's supposed to be kind of funny. We move on. Nobody's laughing. When we feed TMR, how much time does it take to turn into the synthesis of milk? Well, we know that the grain or the fluid portions are going to go really quick. It's going to go really quick there. So that's probably going to get in the bloodstream, get to the small intestine to be absorbed at a much faster rate. Once it's in the small intestine, it then gets absorbed. The nutrient gets absorbed, go in the bloodstream, and that blood then goes to the mammary gland. Bingo! She can synthesize milk. It can go to the liver, where it can do some other neat things to it. It can go to body tissue. It can go a lot of different places. So I'm guessing the TMR on the average, it's within 12 to 16 hours on the board. You talk about a swag, Jim. There it is. I'm guessing most of the nutrients are going to be in the blood, available to the mammary gland that quickly as well. We do know, for example, blood urea nitrogen, if it's high at 12 o'clock today, then 2 hours later, it'll be in the milk. It'll be high at 2 hours. So soluble protein is 2 hours from the time it gets in the rumen or in the blood from the liver to get to the milk. So it's a very dynamic situation. So my colleague from Pakistan, certainly when he says rate of passage, it gets to be a real factor. Again, do you recommend a UNDF 30? No. I just want to clarify that. You want to be sure. I am recommending UNDF 240 for the numbers that I gave you. Now, if you use UNDF 30, then 4 pounds for a jersey and 5 pounds of protein isn't right as far as that goes.
Mike, you were talking about during your webinar about scoring dry cow manure as well and fecal scores. You want to touch on that briefly?
I can. We just haven't done much of it. I don't think you're going to see much. When I walk the dry cow pen, she's all going to stick to your boots. So I make don't. If I see any twos or even too many threes, then I get suspicious. Nothing wrong with a 3, but I just haven't shaken many TMRs. We did have one at an IFAM meeting here a couple of weeks ago with a high straw diet, and the good news, he was shaking 80% in the top 2 boxes. And so that kind of makes sense because high straw diets are going to be 80% forage, and he had chopped it just about right as far as that goes. Should theoretical length of chop be different by percent of corn silage versus alfalfa? Yeah, it should. Yeah, your point's well taken. Whoever asked that question, they get a free month subscription to Hoard's Dairyman. I'm not sure how we'll ever figure that out. But anyway, you're right. So if it's basically a haylage-based diet, then I would have, especially coming out of a bunker or pile, I would expect that the percentage on the box, I think that's how I'm reading it, Jim, the box. If that's not right, you better send me another email, but it might be slightly different. But when we look at ours, and perhaps that's the difference between Penn State and us, that we probably may have, although I don't think it's a good reasoning, that corn silage might be more similar to what the Penn State guidelines are. When they talk 2 to 8% of the top box, we talk 10 to 50% of the top box. We're looking for a baled hay and haylages and baleages and haylage silage coming in there as well. Now,
Mike, I have a good way to figure out that free subscription. If that person emails hoards@hoards.com and tells us Mike Hutjens' favorite flavor of pie for dessert, we'll probably do that.
Oh, wow. Holy smokers. That's really a real challenge because most people wouldn't pick up on pecan. Anyway, we will move on. We'll move on and to our last question we have here. And, well, actually, there's 2. The first one is TT Total Track NDF-D. This is coming from the University of Wisconsin by David Combs. It's a new technique. It's another value out there. And our colleague who brought it was a colleague of mine, Leo Timms. And we're going to talk about that, Leo, in 2 days because I'm not quite sure. This one includes not, and my Pakistani person will be very excited. This includes rate of passage and physical form. And so the number there, the sweet spot you're looking there is 48. And I'm not sure what the units are. It's 48. It's a number 48. And if it's below 42, then you don't have a very good one. So, it's a new kid on the block, and I just can't get my arms around it. So Leo, I don't have a sweet spot other than what the folks in Wisconsin have told me on this one here. Rock River Lab, I believe, is the only lab providing it right now, and that is because it's registered with WARF. That's a foundation, Wisconsin, and you have to find a fee to use that. So nothing wrong with TT NDFD. That's the abbreviation, Total Track NDF Digestibility. It just is that I just don't have a lot of comfort with it. Dave Combs is very high on it, as is John Geiser. And we've had John now on, I think, 1 or 2 webinars. And in fact, I think you had it in one of the last issues of Hoards Dairyman, so you can go back and take a look at that as well. The other question I think might be useful, and that is, why do we look at feed efficiency on the close-up pen at above a 1.5 or below a 1.5? And that means I'm getting lots of dry matter. What scares me, Corey, is those feed efficiencies in the fresh pen that are over 2. We are literally melting those cows down. And one of our very best herds in Illinois, his fresh cow pen sits at routinely at 2 to 2.1, and you can just walk to the fresh cow pen and compare to his dry cow pen, and we're in trouble. So anyway, Corey, that's all our questions for the day. I will let you wrap this one up, and you have a good one, folks.
Well, thank you again, Mike. It's always great working with you, and we appreciate the partnership. And also a shout out to Jim Baltz and Patty Hutjens for all the work they do behind the scenes. That would not be possible without them, and Mike knows that as well. And also, we give a big shout out to Ajimoto Heartland, who's our sponsor today, and we appreciate that, so that Mike could present on-farm feed diagnostics. And again, at week's end, this will be up for the archive for everyone to view again, and be sure to look out for that 7-question survey. And on behalf of Mike Hutjens and our entire team, I'm Corey Geiger, Managing Editor of Hoards Dairyman. Thanks for joining us today. We're ending right on the hour.